Okay, and welcome to what may be the last lecture in this particular course, Desktop Publishing Week 4. We're pretty much about ready to wrap up the material that you'll be covering this semester, and I wanted to finish up our talk on basic web page design because, again, this is a skill that is awfully nice to have, and you should at least know something about it, even though so much of it is been being taken out of your hands by the apps and the cookie color uh, engines that are out there. But I want you to be able to see at least this much. So we're basically going to talk about images and links today. Now we've sort of touched on these things in the previous lectures, but I want to make sure that we understand exactly what these are. Images and links are external assets, and these are things that the web page that you're working on will have to find somewhere else but in the code that's on that particular web page. Now, the image would be the most obvious part of that. That is a file that isn't even text. So the browser will have to reach out for that, even though it's not necessarily reaching out far, and it will have to tell itself where to put this based on the code. So basically, the code's going along, you got the text here, and there's a picture coming up. Find the image and put it there. And that's how the code works. And so again, HTML is just text, and so it has to reference these things. And HTML always starts out local. As we said, you go to your website, there is what's called an index page, and that's going to load first. And it could be that that's the only page. It could be you have a website that fits only on one page. That's actually possible. But typically, it isn't. Typically, you go elsewhere, and then you include other assets. Images need to be loaded separately. So they're part of the code. They have their place within the structure, however the browser is interpreting this. And the server must be able to locate them. And this is probably the worst part of the whole thing. If the server cannot find the image, it will flag it as an error. There will be a little empty window there where the image is supposed to be, or it just won't load. And so in order for the server to find the image, the coding has to be able to find it. And the coding is all you've got. So the biggest errors that you're likely to run into are either you're directing the browser to find the image in a place where it is not, or the image gets moved somewhere else, or there's some hiccup in the code where the code is looking somewhere where the image isn't anymore. Maybe it could even be a misspelling. And the other significant factor is that the image or whatever it is not named properly. For example, if you've got a capital letter versus a lowercase letter, you may not notice that, but the browser sure will, because a capital letter is not the same thing as a lowercase letter. So if it sees a name that's got a capital A in it and you put a lowercase a in it, it's going to say that's not the same file. And that's also true of the file extension. Now, we're living in a world now where nobody even knows that files have extensions because the operating system tries to hide them. But every HTML file has to end in .html or .htm, and that's another problem. Sometimes the file extension is different. You have to know what it is. Or it can be capital HTML or lowercase HTML. And so those are different files too. You literally have to look at these things with a microscope to make sure that they're right. All files must be where they need to be. So if you move a folder or if you move a file from one place to another, the code simply has to be able to keep up with it. Every time you change one thing, you have to make sure the reference changes as well. Now, fortunately, in your case, this should not be a problem because all you've got to do is keep everything in the same folder. Particularly for the resources that you have the most control over. And so that's what we're going to talk about next, global versus local resources. And so local resources are the easiest. Local is better. The more you have control over everything, the safer you are. So let's say you've got a web page about, let's say, bicycling, and you have that in a folder called bicycling website. And everything that is in the website is in that folder. It doesn't matter where you take it, it's perfect. It will always work. If you're using all local resources, they're fine. Now, within that folder, you could have a file called images. As long as the code knows that folder is there and knows that everything in that folder is images, then you're fine. But if you call for an image and you don't tell it to look for that folder, it won't. It'll say, I don't see this anywhere else. And so that can be a pain. And the more you have, all the resources, the better. Now, if you see somewhere in your code the HTTPS://www, that means that you're not local anymore. You use that reference to get out of wherever you are. If you want to go straight out to the universe beyond your website, you have to start with the HTTP or HTTPS, whatever it is today, and then you have to give the complete location of the resource you're looking for. And that could be a very long reference. And if you can do that, the browser will find it as well. So if you're staying local, all you need is a file name. And so if it's local, the browser isn't going to reach out to the sky to find it. It's going to look right there. Now let me give you an example of how this works. Let's say you have something that you want somebody to find. Now let's say you're giving somebody a present or something like that, and you're telling them where it is. And so let's say it's in your car, and you want to tell them where it is. Now if you're in the car, you can say it's in the glove compartment. That's a local link, because wherever the car goes, the whatever it is goes. If the glove compartment's there, that can be like a folder somewhere. Now let's say you're not in your car, but whatever it is in your car. You have to tell them where the car is. And so the first thing you might say is, well, it's in the United States, it's in North Carolina, it's in Fayetteville, it's in Cumberland County, or it's in Cumberland County, it's in Fayetteville, it's in a parking lot on West Main Street, if there is such an address, parking lot number 27J, and it's in the glove compartment. And so if you are starting from scratch, that's what you would have to do. If you were telling somebody an address that was that specific and they initially had no idea where this was, you would have to start from planet Earth. On the other hand, if you're already in the car, you can just go from there. Now the point is, the car can move. Your website can move. You can take it off one server and put it on another, and that will change everything, but it will not change the local links. And so if all your links are local, they go with you. Local moves with you. But to some degree, global does too, meaning that if you're talking about resources that were never in the car in the first place, those aren't necessarily going to move unless they do move. So in other words, if you're going to an image bank somewhere to get a picture and you're paying for that service, it's in their best interest to keep that image where it was, but that's not to say that at some point it won't move. And if it does, then your link doesn't work anymore. So again, it's always better to stay local. Hyperlinks. Hyperlinks work pretty much the same way as images, except these have to do with if you want to go from one page to another. There are global and there are local versions of those as well. And most of the ones that you're going to deal with in this particular assignment are all local. But hyperlinks can take you anywhere, and we'll demonstrate how that works. And the href and the src attributes are the same idea. For an image, it uses an src. For a link, it uses the href. Okay, now here we are back on the website that we were working on before. And once again, we have one image in there. And let's go to another page that has a different image. So I'm going to go back to the bargains. And the bargains, if you look up here in the browser window, it says page2.htm, which is fine, and that corresponds to this. And even though this kind of looks nice with the green, I'm going to replace it with a different image. Now if I go to my web temp folder, I have put some other images in there. And so if you look at these, I've got this building in New York City, and I've also got an image of the Statue of Liberty. So I'm going to use one of those. So the first thing I want to do is look at the image real quick. And so here are here are the images. I'm going to go with this one first. So if I open that up, there it is. Now, how big is this image? If I go to image size, I will see that that is 5,000 pixels across. Now, if you look at the average internet screen or the average computer screen, it's a lot narrower than that. And so at the same time, this is like 3,000 pixels up and down. So if I try to put that on my web page, that's going to be huge. Either that or I'm going to have to tell it to chop it down, in which case it's going to download a bigger picture than it needs because this is 43 megabytes. And so I think that would be bandwidth heavy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring that width way down. I'm going to bring that width down to, say, 500. And immediately that would take us down to less than a megabyte. That's basically half a megabyte right there, and we could probably even do better than that. So I'm going to do that. And so then you can see that my image, if I go to 100% up here, that's how big the image is. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to save it that way because this is designed to be used in that fashion. So then if I go back here to my web temp, there's my image again. And as you can see, it's 147 kilobytes, which is a lot better. All right, so that's what I'm going to put into my page. So here I am in Dreamweaver, and I'm going to go to page 2 because that's what we were looking at. And remember, on page 2, there is that reference somewhere to an image. And that would be right about here. So down there, you can see right below the H1 tag, which says this week's bargains. You know, that's where we had that. And just so you can see what we're following, if I'm over here on the page, we have this week's bargains. And then basically everything below that is this stuff. There's not much on there at all. And so one of the things that we can see is a paragraph mark, and then there is something called the IMG tag, which has the SRC that says do. And so what I want to do is get rid of that. What I want to do is get rid of do. Now I could just modify the code, but I'm going to show you an easier way of doing it. I'm just going to take the entire image tag and I'm going to delete it. Just boom, gone. And if I were to save it at this point, the image disappears. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert the image again using the program because it makes it easier for you. So if I go to Insert Image, there it is up there. Then I get this. It's going to go local, and it's going to show me the images I have available, and I'm going to drop that one in. And if I hit OK, then what it's done is it's figured out a lot of this stuff for me. First of all, that's the name of the image. I wouldn't have known that off the top of my head. Look, it's got those capital letters and a lowercase letter. It's also got my height and width attributes and so forth. Now the alt, not going to worry about that, but if I wanted to, I could write in Statue of Liberty, which basically means that the browser for some reason can't display the image. At least it'll tell you what it is. So now if I hit File, Save, and then go over to the browser, and I hit the refresh button, now it appears on the other side of the screen, and that's because I forgot to do one thing. I had an align attribute on the original image, which put it over here. So if I wanted it there, I can go back here, and there's my image tag. And if I were to go to the end, I'm just going to add one more attribute. I'm going to call that align equals right. And if I do that, do File, Save, and I refresh the page, now it's back where it was. And so you don't necessarily have to do it that way, but it helps. This way you can have some control over where things are. And so this is our showroom, and so if you want to add more images, basically you would do that the same way. You could make images anywhere you want. Now, what I would suggest you do is always be mindful of the code. When you work in live view, you can change some things. You can edit some of this text, and you can move some of this stuff around, but you're guessing in many cases, or the computer's guessing where things are ultimately going to wind up. So I would recommend very strongly that you stay in code view and use your browser to see what happens. Do each change and refresh the browser and see if you like it. And if you don't, do something else. Okay, so that's as far as we really need to go with images. But in terms of links, links are a little bit different. And again, links are typically going to be either external or local. And so after this week's bargains, we've really got very little text here. This is our showroom. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply say something else. And so I'm going to extend this. This is our showroom. We stock everything, but we have more stuff here. So let's say I want to make here a link to somewhere else. So first of all, I'm going to save this and see what happens over here. And I refresh it. We have more stuff here. Now right now here is just a word. And so let's pretend that I have another stockroom here on page 3, which I haven't mentioned. And I want to have here go to page 3. Because right now page 3 is just that mess. But let's go back here for a minute. So I'm going to say, well, actually I'm on page 2 now, I'm on bargains. So I'm going to say here goes to page 3, even though we already have a link going there. If I go back here and I go to this word and I highlight it, then I can go to insert link. And that would be down here, hyperlink. And so there, the text that will show up is here. And in this case, for the link, I'm just going to hit the little folder thing and I'm going to find page 3. And I'm just going to tap that, and that's all it's going to say. The rest of the stuff we won't get into. So I hit OK, and what happens is the word here is there, and there's an anchor tag that has an href, says page3.htm, and the anchor tag closes there. So if I save this, and I go over to here and refresh it, then there here is now a link. And so if I hit here, it gets there. And I can go back to page 2, and that's how it works. Now, that may be something you want to do. You can have links going to other pages that you've created, or if you want to create pages, but you're also welcome to stay within these 4. But let's say I wanted to go someplace further away. Let's say I wanted to go to the Methodist University website, for example. So here I'm back in code view on Dreamweaver. And I'm just going to go on typing. And so I'm going to go down a line. Now, one way you can do that is to use a break tag. Just a BR, it's a simple little thing. And then, see, it doesn't matter how many actual spaces that you put here. It's only going to read the BR. So let's say I add a link that says, welcome to my school. Visit So that's Visit Methodist University, file save, and then we'll go ahead and refresh it here. And so there it is. And so I'm going to go back here, and in this case I'm going to add one more break because I don't think I really had enough space there. There are other ways of doing this as well. I'm going to go to Methodist University, highlight that, and this time I'm going to edit the link differently. So I'm going to insert a hyperlink, and there's the text. Instead of hitting that folder, I'm just going to go here, and I'm going to go to Methodist directly. So I'm going to type in https://www.methodist.edu, and let's see what that does. So here it has that hyperlink. You see it's got the href and it's got all that information. Notice I didn't have to type that. Now what I did do apparently was I somehow moved that link outside of part of the word university. And so all I'm going to do now to fix that is I'm just going to take the ending of that anchor tag, just move it over there, and that's fine. So let's see what happens. I can do file save, and then I go here and refresh it. So Methodist University is now a hyperlink, and what happens if I hit that? Lo and behold, there I am. And I go back, and I'm back here. And so that means that you can basically add a link going anywhere, and a link is generally part of a text. Now, on the other hand, you can also do it with an image. Let's say I wanted to make that image go someplace. Well, you can do that too. So if I wanted to make the picture of the Statue of Liberty go someplace, First of all, let's find out where we want to go. Now, there is a site that you might consider appropriate about the Statue of Liberty, and this would be the Liberty Ellis Foundation. So let's say I just go right there, and I right-hand click and copy the link. And so that's where I want to go, and I go to Dreamweaver. If I highlight that image tag, which would be the Statue of Liberty, and then I were to go to Insert Hyperlink, and there the text is the image file, or the image tag rather. And so if I just Control V on the source, that would take care of that. So that would be the entire link, which can be relatively long. I'm just going to hit OK there. And so then if I go and save this, and I go back here and refresh it, the picture doesn't change, but when you pass the cursor over it, it becomes a finger. And when you click on it, it takes you here. And so there you go. Okay, so time to face reality. Even though we've gone over some elements of the code, I want you to understand that the internet is not the same as it used to be. There have been a lot of changes. HTML is now the first step to many websites. And most websites are designed not to be easy to edit, and most companies would not try to do so. And that is just the reality of it, because you have these design companies that are putting in all kinds of trying to make it more difficult. But that doesn't mean you cannot occasionally save the day with at least some knowledge of how the system works. So if we go to my beloved Methodist University page, and you were to right-click on it down here, and you go to View Page Source, you will see this. Now, almost nothing you see here is HTML, and that's because you've got a lot of external coding to do all of these wonderful things that we're getting used to. And if you format that properly, you can see some of the appropriate information. But if you were able to do a search in there and find some word you wanted to change, you still might be able to do it. But I'm just saying, there are options here. And then you take your folder that's got your web temp stuff in it, whatever is there, whatever you need to make the web page work has to be in there, and then just send those files to me. That's basically all you got to do. And of course, you can delete the ones that you don't want to use. If you don't want to use this one, you don't have to use this one. And of course, you can put in your other images, whatever you want, and then just send it to me in some fashion. Zip it, or usually the email system will do that for you. Use a file transfer system, but they should be very small files anyway. And at long last, we have reached the end of the road. That is all you need to know about this particular subject, and really we've covered the gambit for this semester. It's been a pleasure working with you, and I hope to see all of you again.